his brothers would bow down to him. And what was happening in that period of time while he was in the pit, he was learning something. And he found himself absolutely, totally dependent upon God. Only God could get him out of that. Well, because he had the right attitude about it, and because he took advantage of the opportunity to trust God in this helpless, hopeless situation, what he didn't know was that God was preparing him for a time when he would be in a similar situation, much worse. And yet, God would be there to rescue him no matter what. You see, oftentimes we forget that one crisis in our life is oftentimes preparation for enabling us to go through something worse. And the truth is, if you'll think about it, how do we grow? We grow in the Christian life by facing one trial after the other, one heartache, one hardship. And oftentimes, if you'll think about it, we don't think it's fair, but God does. That it seems that, well, if I survive this one, why should this one be so much more difficult? And if I survive this one, God, it ought to get easier and easier. How many of you have asked, you don't have to tell me, how many of you have said to God, why doesn't it get easier somewhere along the way? Because what makes us grow is the testing and the trial. And you see, the greater the test, the greater the trial, it's like we just keep pushing and pushing, or he does, and we just grow up and up and up, and we don't like it, but at the same time, something good's going on. So now he's thrown in the pit. So his brother comes along and says, no, it's no way we're going to kill him. Let's sell him to these caravans that are going by. And so they decide to sell him as a slave into Egypt. So this was another crisis. Here he is going further and further away from his family in Canaan. He's going to be sold as a slave. That means he's a nobody. That he is absolutely useless, and that he'll be lost in a civilization that was absolutely foreign, totally foreign to them. So think about it. He could have fought against his captors. He could have gotten very belligerent and blaming them and wondering where God was, or take the opportunity. I'm going to Egypt. I'm going to learn what Egypt's about. If I'm a slave, I'm going to learn their language. I'm going to learn their ways. I'm going to learn how they operate. That is, I'm going to take advantage of this opportunity. Somehow, in some way, God's going to work me out of this, which was also preparation for another event that was coming in his life. So when he gets to Egypt, they put him on the block to sell him. And of all the people that would buy him would be the man who is the chief bodyguard. He's captain of the bodyguard of Pharaoh himself. And so he purchases Joseph and puts him in his household. But you see, he's already been learning a little bit as he's coming along. And now he could see himself as a slave, or he could see himself with a tremendous opportunity. He could learn the language of the Egyptians. He could learn how the upper class in Egypt operate and live. He could learn about their wealth. He could learn about how to function in another family. This is a family that saw him as a servant, and as a Hebrew servant at that. And of course, Hebrews and the Egyptians sort of looked down on each other. The Egyptians thought Hebrews were lower class because they're all shepherds. And so he had to deal with that, because naturally when he first got to Potiphar's household, they didn't just welcome him in as a part of the family. So no doubt he was looked down upon at first, and had the same kind of situation to some degree that he had suffered back in his own family, as sort of a nobody in their mind. Each one of these situations was just getting him ready for the next one. And each one he saw as an opportunity to learn something, to develop something. So he certainly saw in Potiphar's household a wonderful opportunity to learn the ways of an Egyptian family, to learn the ways of the Egyptian culture. He also learned how to be a leader. He learned how to manage. Because finally, Potiphar said, you've done so well, I'm going to put you in charge of my whole household. So he comes as a slave, as a nobody, and now he's the number one person in the family, apart from the intimate family themselves, and he's overseeing all of Potiphar's, his business, everything. He's in charge. So what was God doing? God once again was preparing him for something that was ahead. And if we can get that in our thinking, that whatever I'm going through today is preparation for something I'm going to face tomorrow. If you get that attitude and you begin to operate on that basis, then things begin to change in the way you see them. So he saw this as a wonderful opportunity. And watch this. Every time he took advantage of the opportunity, he came out winning. He came as a slave, but his attitude was right, because there's no indication that it wasn't. And so what happens? It wasn't an accident that the captain of the bodyguard of Pharaoh happened to be the man who purchased him. So now he is in Potiphar's household, and everything's going better. And then what happens? The next crisis he meets is Potiphar's wife. And so she began to woo him and try to seduce him every way possible. She could have destroyed him. The truth is, he could have destroyed himself. But here's what he saw. He saw this as an opportunity, watch this carefully, to discover about himself his weaknesses and his strengths. And he said to her, your husband has placed everything in this household in my possession. He said, he has given me everything in this household but you. And I cannot prove to be unfaithful to God and disobey him. That crisis was an awesome opportunity for him to discover his own strength, his own faithfulness, his own loyalty, his own devotion, no matter what the price would be. And he knew there had to be a price, because she, of course, accused him, and he got thrown in jail. And so you see, every time you and I are tempted by something, it is also an opportunity for us to find out something about ourselves, whether it is a moral temptation or financial temptation or temptation about some relationship or whatever it might be. There's also an opportunity. And the opportunity for him was that he could demonstrate to her that his allegiance and loyalty to God superseded every other desire in his life. He had all of Potiphar's household. He didn't have her. More important than having everything was to have his relationship to God to be right. How very important it was, because that too would provide basis for something else that was going to happen in his life. So following that, of course, he gets thrown into prison. So now we are into the next phase of his crisis. And when he's thrown into prison, he could have said, well, God,